Wonderful. All right. Welcome, everyone. You are in the right place if you are hoping to be attending the Center for Independent Futures 2025 webinar series. My name is Kathy Lyons, and tonight we will be focused on PUNS, what you want to know before applying, while on the wait list and after, and also about some other funding options that you or your loved one may be able to access while you're waiting on the wait list. Before I introduce our presenter, Heather here, I want to just take this opportunity to briefly share a little bit about Center for Independent Futures. We are a nonprofit based in Evanston, Illinois, committed to meeting the needs of disabled individuals to achieve independence and lead their best full life. We support individuals' hopes and dreams using our person-centered approach to enhancing independence through one-on-one coaching, experiential learning, and shared activities. Outside of direct services with our CIF community members, we offer curriculum and trainings. We have a My Full Life digital learning platform, which offers comprehensive, ready-to-use resources for life skills education and curriculum. The platform is user-friendly and visually engaging, and it enables both instructors and learners to easily access tools and set goals and track progress. Our platform is currently used in high schools and their transition programs, as well as in other organizations. We also offer a four-series workshop training called New Futures Initiative that offers individuals and their families a step-by-step process to creating their own supported creative housing solutions. I will include some links to these other programs in the chat, but now I'd like to get to the reason we're here tonight and introduce our presenter, Heather from A Love for Special Learning. Heather is a former special education high school teacher and transitions specialist. She's been that for 15 years, and I think it was about 5 years ago that we connected when she reached out to have Center for Independence speak to her students. She's developed a love for special learning to support both educators and families. In addition to her work as a teacher, she supported families and students as they developed their vision for life post-exit and walked alongside them as they applied for benefits to make their dreams a reality. By making the really, really complicated world of benefits easier to understand for both families and young adults, Heather's increased everybody's ability to access and benefit from a variety of funding, services, and supports. We think that the material that Heather's got is just outstanding and makes things digestible in a way that many others just cannot. So there may be time. We'll see if there's time at the end for questions. If you do have a question, please put it into the chat and we'll try to work through them at the end. And if we don't have enough time, we can send out responses via email after Heather's had a chance to address them, and we'll get back to people. I am just thrilled to introduce and share this screen with Heather. And Heather, I'm just gonna give it to you to take it away.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Does that look good to you, Kathy? Okay, great. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Kathy. That was, warm to my heart, as I like to say, hand to my heart. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be speaking tonight primarily about PUNS, what you need to know before you apply, while you're on the wait list, and then after. But I'll also talk about DHS home services too, which might be an option for your loved one in that waiting period while you're on the wait list for PUNS. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm a former special education teacher. I taught in high school, but I spent the majority of my time at the transition level. And I also, in conjunction with being the transition teacher, I was a transition facilitator. So my last 2 years in the classroom, I worked alongside families and students as they were crafting their post-exit vision, and then I was helping them decide what benefits would, help them achieve that dream. And then we would walk together and apply for them and get them set up with these benefits. I've had my small business, A Love for Special Learning, for 12 years now. So this is just one component of my small business. I also create resources for educators to use in their classroom or families if they're homeschooling. And I took everything that I learned from being in the classroom as a teacher, creating resources, and working with families as they were learning about benefits. And I created what I call Take Advantage Illinois. And I named it because I found myself saying, you really need to take advantage of this benefit, and you really need to take advantage of this time. Let's take advantage of this wait time, while you're on the PUNS list. And so it's called Take Advantage Illinois. And so my website is aloveforspeciallearning.com/IL is where you'll find capital I, capital L is where you'll find all of the information that I'm going to share tonight. So I want to kind of lay the foundation for PUNS and adult services in general. So special education is obviously an entitled program. So that's why there's a picture of a school, meaning if you have a disability, you are entitled to certain services and support and education. When you move out of that setting, whether that be you graduate or you age out at 22, you move into an eligibility adult services. And then if you set up with the right, benefits, then you get to reap the benefits of those benefits, so to say, and hopefully be able to continue using and building upon the skills that have been built and strengthened over all those years in education. But specifically when we're talking about eligibility, it is super important to lead with need. And I say this because having worked with so many families who typically were very proud of the progress that their young adult had made and wanted to share that, and we should. These programs are deficit-based. So we want to lead with need, meaning we want to make sure that we can articulate and describe in as much detail as possible the needs that the individuals have that will make them eligible for these benefits. And so just to kind of give you the full scope from start to finish, a waiver program is a funding source, and therefore it has eligibility criteria. So again, that comes back to that lead with need, is being able to articulate and convey, prove through medical records and documentation the need for these benefits and resources. Then there is an application process for benefits. Again, specifically, we're talking about PUNS tonight, so there is an application process for PUNS. An individual can be approved or denied. Again, that's kind of the difference of being in the education setting where things are entitlement to eligibility. And then setting up and using. So there is usually that period of time after an individual has been approved, or if they've been denied, they go through the appeal process to be approved, to then set up benefits. And again, that looks different than the education setting because that is usually led by the family or the self-advocate or whoever is providing care and can speak to how the individual needs to be best supported. But I wanted to add Medicaid to the front of my waiver program title because if you've turned on the news, you've probably heard about a Medicaid crisis at this time. So I'm going to give you some information and then I'm going to give you after this slide where you can go to get additional information. So the current administration, I'm going to tell you kind of where they are, what is already passed and what's on the table in terms of Medicaid cuts. And while this is not something I want to lead with in this presentation, which I kind of feel like is almost like a scare tactic, um, I see it as what, a barrier to accessing these benefits. And my hope is that when I created Take Advantage and when I share this information on this very slide for you, is I'm reducing that barrier. I'm making it easier for you to go to know what you're doing, to perhaps be more proactive, to feel more informed and confident so that you can pursue these. But at the same time, I want to be realistic with you. So things that you need to know. PUNS is the name of the wait list for the Medicaid waiver. And Illinois receives a 50% federal match. So whatever funding an individual receives once they are pulled off the PUNS list, Illinois is providing 50% of that, and the federal government is providing the other 50%. In the particular name of the waiver is called the HCBS, and that stands for Home and Community-Based Services Medicaid waiver. And here in the state of Illinois, it is considered optional funding. So that's kind of some language, some terminology just to be aware of. I do want to highlight that in our state, and this is not the case in every state, it's different in Michigan, but here in Illinois, it's considered optional funding. So to be aware of what's already passed, the current administration has already passed significant, and I put that in all caps because it is trillions of dollars in budget cuts they have approved to the House Committee on Energy and Commerce over the next 10 years. And so given the makeup of that particular committee, it would be very difficult for them to cut budgets and that not affect Medicaid. Okay. So when people are, you hear on the news that people are concerned about cuts to Medicaid, this is already one step that has been taken. What's on the table still, and when I say what's on the table still, is that it's currently on the table. These things are currently trying to be passed. Things are currently trying to be stopped from being passed. Is these three things that kind of boil. What I'm gathering is it comes to repealing what's called the Medicaid access rule. This was a rule that expanded the HCBS waiver. So the home and community-based waiver that funds when you get pulled off the PUNS list. This was expanded under the Biden administration, and there's current efforts to repeal that. There's current efforts to implement a work requirement. I've read as much as 80 hours per month that they want people to work or contribute to their community or be in a work program in order to be eligible for Medicaid. And there's kind of some hoops individuals that have to jump through in order to not be held to that standard. So again, another barrier. But then there's also block grants and per capita caps. And so knowing that Illinois has this particular waiver as optional funding, that would be obviously another great concern, that if those were to be implemented, that funding for PUNS to provide long-term services would be jeopardized. So if you're asking yourself, what can I do? You can call and email, and this would be something you would want to do sooner rather than later. And so I wrote tonight, since you're just coming off, and I'm going to give you a bunch of information about hopefully how you can access this benefit to build the best, and as Kathy said, best and full life for your loved one. And so if you feel compelled, this is concerning to you, I would do this tonight. And so this is a QR code. You can scan it with your phone, and it will take you to the ARC. It will take you, I should have timed myself, it probably will take you 15 seconds to do the form where you put in your address, and it will automatically identify your representatives and your senators, and you press send, and it will send them an email to let them know that you would be against any cuts to Medicaid. And while we're going to spend the rest of tonight living in the present, I wanted to kind of get this out of the way. Although I feel like it's not always the best, it's not the best foot to start off the presentation on. Uh, I want you to not forget to be proactive in advocating for that future. And so the ARC, I got the email yesterday from the ARC that they're having a webinar tomorrow from 12 to 1 p.m. So if you have more questions, if you want more details, if you want a way to take more action, to be more informed, you can join that webinar. And there is a QR code there. And if you guys have questions, if you want the specific link, just put it in the chat. And I'd be happy to send that out before I get off this call tonight. So, okay, so we're going to go back to living in the present. We're going to talk about things as they currently exist. So I'm going to start off by talking about the two PUNS funding, but kind of the two most common buckets of paint within PUNS funding. And so there is home-based, and in my experience working with families who were just getting ready to exit the special education system, this tended to be where they were starting. I can't give you an exact percentage, like this is where most, individuals choose to, the option that they choose to pursue. But it would be quite common for individuals who are younger to pursue this and just getting out of that high school or transition setting. And so PUNS funding, hopefully in plain language, is a funding to move my bars. Okay, here we go. Funding to pay for services so an individual can continue to live at their home while taking advantage of offerings within their community. Okay, so home-based funding, meaning they're going to stay and they're going to continue to live at home as they have and can access things that are in their community. Now, this could mean continuing to access things that are in their community with just funding that helps pay for those services. People who would be eligible for PUNS, number one, they need to have a social security number. They need to have an intellectual and developmental disability, and their IQ needs to be 70 or lower. And so this is where, when I said lead with needs, right, is we are having either the documentation, proof of their intellectual developmental disability, as well as their IQ. And then why would somebody pursue PUNS? Kind of like, what do you get if you choose to do PUNS funding and you want the home-based option? So you can use this money and it's monthly money, to pay for personal care aids, transportation, therapies, respite, recreational programming, day programming, and other needs. And once an individual is funded, they're funded until they pass. And how do they do this? How do they get this funding? Is they enroll and then they wait on the PUNS list. And as of about 3 weeks ago, I would say, it had kind of been like the 60-month wait, so 5 years, and PUNS released that they are currently at 44 months, which is amazing. So 44 months after the age of 18 is how long somebody would wait. So 48 months is 4 years. So if an individual participates in their transition program, according to PUNS, they would receive funding just before they were to exit that program at age 22, which is ideal. Now, 44 months is not ideal. However, we are not the worst state. We're not the best state, but we're not the worst state. So getting on the PUNS list sooner rather than later is best. So again, kind of like a broad overview of these services before I kind of start to get into the nitty gritty of PUNS, is you're going to apply, or you're going to get on the PUNS list. You're going to wait on that PUNS list. And then once you've waited your 44 months, you're going to get a letter. That letter is going to say, do you want to apply for services? And you're going to say to yourself, wait, I thought I already applied for services. I've been sitting on this wait list for 44 months, right? This language can be confusing. What that just means is that you are getting ready to be, you're ready to get that check, that monthly check. And so they want to push you through the process in order to know how to use that money to best support your loved one. And you'll have, after you get that letter, It says, do you want to apply for services? You have 6 months to set it up, meaning you have to go through the application to be approved for Medicaid if you're already not. You have to decide, is there a day program? Is there therapies that we want to start? Do we want to get set up with transportation? Do we want to find a personal driver, a respite provider, whatever that means? To use those funds, there's a 6-month period to set that up before the first check starts. Okay. So you've chosen home-based, and this could also include paying family to care for them. And so you're going to continue using that funding until you decide that there is a different need, and that other need might be CILA need, Community Integrated Living Arrangement. So I'm going to get into the nitty gritty now of PUNS. And when I say nitty gritty, it's because I sat in with families and young adults in my program as we, as we enrolled on the PUNS waitlist. And as we sat on the PUNS waitlist, and as families got their letters saying, let's apply for services, and as they were setting them up. So what I'm going to go through is everything that I learned having actually gone through the real process with real families and real self-advocates. And I'm going to share with you the frustrations they had, the mistakes they made, the questions that they had, the things that they wish they would have known, all the way from like getting started to waiting to being able to plan and everything in between. I've shared all of that for free on my website. So I'm going to click on here and go to that website, but I also have it if you like to write things down, is aloveforspeciallearning.com/PUNS Illinois. Okay, so can everyone see that? Should say Illinois PUNS list benefit. Yeah, great. Okay, so again, this is all for free on my website. I'm going to go through this and kind of highlight some key information. And I just thought I can create a bunch of slides where I could just show you where you would find this information if you want to reference it again. So I just covered what PUNS is. PUNS, in case you're curious, stands for the Prioritization of Urgency of Needs for Services. Every state has their own name for their wait list to use the HCBS waiver. This is just what Illinois calls it. And as I mentioned, the individual would need to have a social security number, an intellectual developmental disability, like autism, Down syndrome, cognitive impairment, and would need to have an IQ of 70 or lower. It is best to have individuals be enrolled on this prior to their 18th birthday. And I say prior because as of about, I think it's been 2 years now, 2 or 3, the state has started funding individuals who were younger than 18. So again, this is great news. So if you're like, oh, I need to do that, I know I need to do that, I would put this at the very top of your list, regardless of how old your loved one is, because they could get pulled before they turn 18. Now, if they don't get pulled before they turn 18, once they turn 18, that 44-month wait list or time clock starts. And the first myth I want to bust is that you don't have to wait 10 plus years to get funding, assuming your individual is 18 years or older. Now, if they've got on the wait list at 3, yes, they might be waiting many years. But if they got on right at 18, the current wait time is 44 months. And this is also not a lottery system, meaning they don't put everybody's name into a pile and pull one out and say, you're the winner. You've only been on this wait list for 3 years or 3 days or 3 months. You win. No, they say, how long have you been on the wait list? The people waiting the longest will get funded first. Okay, so if you get on the wait list at 20 and you wait your 44 months, you're going to be pulled off first from the list. Okay, so that's why you want to make this a top priority to get on, because you're going to be waiting anyways, right? You're going to be accruing your wait time. You want to do this first and just get on the list, right? You keep moving up that wait list like you would at a restaurant, right? So top priority. I have these visuals in terms of time commitment and energy commitment. I'm going to start with the energy one in the blue on the right. Uh, in comparing what can be provided once an individual gets funded, the amount of energy you have to commit to pursue this benefit is actually very low. The time commitment is also mainly just at the front end. Okay. So the hardest part is like call number 2 when I go through the phone calls to be enrolled um, at about between 30 and like 75 minutes. That should be the longest, most time consuming part. And after that, it would be very incremental until you get pulled off the list. Then you're going to set up services. That's going to take a long time. You want to make sure that you're doing right by the individual. Uh, so time commitment is actually is not huge for how beneficial this benefit can be. So step number 1, when you go through the process, is you want to gather all your basic contact information, the disability and the social security number. And if the individual has a Medicaid already set up, you'll want to have the Medicaid card as well. Now, if you're like, I know my loved one has Down syndrome, for example, but you're not sure of the IQ. So this is where you would want to go. If the individual is still in school or recently graduated and you have, or if they have been and you have these reports somewhere in your email, do an email search. And you want to find a 3-year reevaluation. You want to look at the report, and what you're trying to find in that report is the FSIQ, which stands for full scale IQ. Now, this can be gathered from a variety of different tests. This is just some of the tests you might see. So you might see WISC, Wyatt, WISE, Stanford Binet, but they're going to ultimately come down to a number, and they're going to call it the FSIQ. That is the number that they're going to ask for in your very first phone call when you call to enroll in the PUNS list. They're going to ask you what the IQ is, so you can look for that in your paperwork. Now, if your loved one is not yet 18 and you're not sure what their IQ is, you can ask for it. If you want to start pursuing benefits, that would be appropriate for you to ask at their next IEP meeting or the next round of reevaluations, or just email their case manager and say, when would be the next opportunity for testing to be able to obtain an IQ test or an IQ score? Because they're going to need that IQ score for other benefits as well, specifically Social Security. They would need that IQ. Okay, so you've gathered your IQ score, you've read through reports, you verified the disability, and basic contact information, birthday, stuff like that. And if they have a Medicaid card, you have that card. So the first step to pursuing benefits is to do an intake. So you're going to call your local office, and I've also linked all the offices here, so they're down lower, but if you're not sure which office you're in, you can find that there. And you're going to say, I want to have a PUNS intake is the name of the call. And what will happen is they'll probably transfer you to somebody. They're going to say, okay, this is your PASS agent, or you're going to be doing pre-admission screening. This is just fancy language for someone who is just going to take your information. Okay. This call should take you less than 5 minutes, and they're just going to ask you those things: basic contact information, Social Security number, Medicaid number if they have it, disability, and IQ. And once they have that, they're going to use that as kind of like a level 1 screening and say, are we going to go through with the next step to decide if you are eligible for PUNS? Okay, so you want to have all of that. And now it is in your local office's hands, right? You took initiative, you had that less than 5-minute phone call, and now the future communication will be initiated by people in that office, which is good, right? It's a lot easier to answer a phone call than it is to pick up the phone and make the phone call, okay? So they're going to pass that information on. Whoever gathered that information, they're going to pass it on to probably what they'll call an ISC agent, which stands for Independent Service Coordination Agent. And this is the person who is going to help you with meeting number 2, which I said is probably the most time consuming or comprehensive meeting that you'll have for this like whole process. So they're going to pass your information along. Somebody's going to reach out to you and say, we're going to set up an enrollment meeting. Okay. Typically, in my experience, these meetings have gone as fast as 30 minutes and they've gone as long as 75 minutes. Usually, it was less than an hour. I would book an hour with my families and typically we did not take that long. But this is the most important phone call because this is where they're going to gather all the information to create the profile to be on the wait list. Excuse me. This may be done via a video call. It may be done in person, or it might be done over the phone. And this can vary by office too, and probably even vary by time of year. It is helpful to have your students' most recent IEP if they're still in school. If they're recently exited, still have their IEP. It's going to have a lot of information very handy for you, such as related services that they pursued. And they're going to, the phone call is going to start where they're going to share a lot of information with you, and you're going to mainly listen and take it in. And then they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. And this is where they're going to create a profile. And so, I feel like I hear a lot of times PUNS funding, PUNS funding, PUNS funding. When you're talking to an ISC agent, they're going to be using terms like the HCBS Medicaid waiver. They won't call it PUNS funding because to them, PUNS is just the wait list, right? They're going to talk about Medicaid funding, waiver funding, home services funding, things like that. So just to be aware of that change in terminology. It all means the same thing. We're all talking about apples and apples. So the ISC agent will start by sharing 3 statements. They're going to say that the PUNS list is not a guarantee for services, which is correct. You are just getting on the wait list to wait to apply for services, right? How I mentioned that can be really confusing. But the ISC agent is not going to waste your time. They're going to go, either they're going to say, this would not be a good fit, that very first intake phone call that you have, or at the end of this enrollment meeting, they're going to say, you might not, this individual might not be appropriate for this funding. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your 44 months, right? They're not going to, their job is to make sure that you don't waste your time. But they do have to tell you that is not a guarantee of services. There are living arrangements available to individuals other than community-based. As you probably know, since you're sitting on a webinar series through Center for Independent Futures, the PUNS Medicaid waiver is for community-based services only. Individuals can pursue what's called an ICF, which stands for Immediate Care Facility Placement, and they should work with their ISC agent, the person on the enrollment meeting with you, to access that option, which is down a little bit farther here. The initial meeting should be held face-to-face. Again, where you are located, how your office is doing it, even how your office is staffed, that might look different. They may do face-to-face, phone call, or Zoom. And subsequent yearly updates can be conducted over the phone. Okay, the ISC agent is then going to talk to you about your 3 options. I did mention the first 2 before we went into this web page here. So home-based services. So as I said, this is where all these kind of services right here, all the way down through here, right? Home-based services can pay for all of those. Now, if you're like, oh, I want to know more about what is the occupational therapy or out-of-home respite. So I have a link here to, if you scroll down to section 3, it will give you the full list and little descriptions of what each of those benefits kind of mean, like what they would kind of look like. The big thing with this one is that I saw most of my families want to pursue is it does allow a family member to be paid to provide care for the individual in their own home. So if they're going from being in school full-time to then being home once they've exited, If there's concern about who's going to be caring for them and providing, meeting their basic needs, home-based services can pay a family member to provide care in their own home. So this can be a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, a relative. Option number 2 is called community integrated living arrangement. A lot of people will call it CILA, not with an S, but with a C. CILA stands for community integrated living arrangement. And this is for individuals who want to live in their community as opposed to living at home with family. And so people will also call group homes CILAs, right? But that does not mean that if you choose CILA funding, your loved one has to go to a group home. Again, you probably know this because you're on the Center for Independent Futures webinar series. So I want to point this out. CILA is a funding source. It is not a place. So if your loved one is like, I want to live in an apartment by myself or with a roommate, or you want to convert, some building on your property, or you want to live with, a group of guys and have somebody there intermittently to kind of oversee safety and provide support. CILA funding can do all of that. And it can be, used in a variety of different ways. And your ISC rep agent can share more options about what that looks like, as well as Kathy and her team at Center for Independent Futures. There is kind of 2 types within CILA. There's 24/7 care, but there's also what's called an intermittent option, intermittent CILA, which is about 15 hours per week. And I have seen families who will work with other families who have their loved ones have different levels of support. So one of the families may have a loved one with 24/7 needs, and the other family may have a loved one with 15 hours per week. And so they use those in conjunction with each other to get just the right support kind of when they need it. So if I was at a parent fair about just over a week ago, and they were like, they don't need 24/7, but they need a little bit more. They need a daily check-in. I'm like, I think you're looking for an intermittent. And they're like, yeah, they want to live with a roommate. I was like, you want to pair it, ideally you would love to pair that with somebody who has kind of that more daily check-in. So again, this is where you are creative. And then option number 3 is called an ICF, which stands for intermediate care facilities. And this is typically for individuals who have more intense medical needs that require continuous monitoring. And I say this, if your loved one would fall into the, a IFC level need, you probably already know that. I'm not probably sharing anything new with you. Okay, so once the ISC agent shares kind of the 3 options with you, you do not have to pick at that meeting which one you want. They may ask, is there one that kind of speaks to you? And you can say CILA or home-based or whatever. But that is not a hard and fast. You don't have to choose at that meeting. You actually don't have to choose until you get your apply letter. But it is helpful for them to know. They may ask you kind of what you see your loved one wanting to pursue. The ISC agent will then talk about there are 2 lists. And so what the state has done is they said, yes, we have one PUNS wait list, but we're going to have kind of 2 subcategories. Planning is for kind of those families who got on, 3 years old, 7 years old, super young. They don't need the funding just yet, but they're getting their place, they're letting their need be known. And then you have the seeking, which an individual should move to that seeking list when they turn 18. This should be automatic, but I'll tell you it's not always automatic. So if your individual is almost 18, newly 18, if you're just curious because you've been on it, you can just call up your ISC agent, email them, say, is my loved one on the seeking list? And if they're not, your ISC agent can just move them right over. But that's where your 44 months of wait time starts, when you're on that seeking list. So then right after that, they explain the difference between the seeking and the planning list. They're going to start to ask questions about the current needs of your loved one. And so again, if your individual is in school and you have a recent IEP, wonderful. They're probably going to ask you about related services, so you'd be able to go through that IEP and share whether they had language or social work, things like that. They're also going to ask you things about how they got to and from school, whether did they take the school bus, walk, drive, things like that, public transportation. They'll ask about vocational experiences, both in school and out, as well as their long-term goals and needs for employment. They will also ask about any assistive technology that has been used, they're currently using, as well as any nursing needs too. What the ISC agent, the person on the enrollment meeting with you, is trying to do is just trying to create a picture along with you of what the individual's needs are and kind of what they see for their future. And they are going to ask that too. They're going to ask the individual, what do you want to do? What sounds fun for you? How would you want to spend your day? Again, just to paint that picture. I have included here in all the meetings I sat in, I would take notes. What are you asking me? How can I be best prepared for my next family? And so these were the questions that my students and my families were asked. So if you're like, you really want to know, you really want to go and be prepared, you really want to make it a 30-minute phone call, this is where you would go through and see all the questions that you, or these questions will be phrased in some sort of way. This is typical information that the agent would seek to know. I do want to make note of this. An odd piece of information is they may ask for the birth dates of the parents or any primary family members who are providing the care, because aging parents can impact care for the individual with a disability. And so if a grandparent who is aging is a primary caregiver, that's important information to know. I always felt weird when I would sit with a student and then I would have to call the parent and say, I'm going to need to know your birthday, right? Or whoever is providing that care. So it does matter because they want to know that if, an individual has a higher level of need and the person who's providing primary care at home is also aging and may not be able to meet that need, that's information they want to know to create the best picture. So then once you've shared all that information, typically the ISC agent will ask if you want to get on the PUNS list right then and start your wait time, your time clock, right? You can say yes. There really probably isn't a bad reason, like, you probably don't want to say no, I want to wait, because all you really need to do is the ISC agent is going to print all that information. They can snail mail it to you or they can email it to you. And you have to look it over, sign it, and return it. And that is the final step to say, yes, you were on the PUNS list, right? Is that signing and sending back. So make sure you sign and make sure you send that back, okay? Then you have ongoing updates. So you do have to update it every year. And in that meeting, they're taking information, contact information, stuff like that. Whoever's listed as the primary contact, a parent, even the advocate can be listed as a primary contact. They'll be contacted about 2 to 3 months before the 1-year mark of when they entered the PUNS list. And the ISC agent will say, we need to do a yearly update. Now, what they want to know is they want to get a better picture. Have things changed? Is there new guardianship paperwork? Perhaps, the family pursued that. Is there any new behavior, medical concerns? Has the family structure changed? Has plans for the future changed? Were they approved for SSI or Medicaid? Have they moved out of the state and they no longer need to be on the PUNS list? That's also very important because they don't want people on the PUNS list, wait list, who don't need the funding. So this is an important part of staying active on the PUNS list. This should take you less than 15 minutes to update on the phone. Then they're going to do the same they're going to send you the paperwork you have to sign and return. So make sure that you're doing that on a timely manner. Will continue continue your status on the wait list. if a crisis occurs, and I'll go through this in just a minute, but if something changes about the individual, the primary caregiver, or the family, and there is an immediate need for funding to best care for that individual, there is something called crisis funding, which means that the individual would bypass that 44-month wait list time. And so this is one way that you can be prepared for when the unexpected happens, quote unquote. There's a lot of examples I could give you to, as a scare tactic. I don't need to do that. But if you're like, I want to set them up to be prepared, getting on the wait list and filling out all this ahead of time is just one way to prepare. Because if something happens, it is a lot quicker to go through the crisis, pathway and be approved much quicker than waiting 44 months. If this is already set up. Okay, so you're on the wait list and you filled out your forms, you sign them, you send them back, you've done 1 or 2 updates, and you're like, I'd really like to know when they're going to be funded, because you want to start planning financially. You want, your loved one wants to know what the plan is in 3, 5, 10 years, whatever it is. You can send them an email. So this is an automated system. And you email this email address right here. And I would have my students and my families, I would say, put this as your subject line. It doesn't really matter because it's an automated system, but all you need to do is you need to sound the full name and the birthday. And I like to put, when will I be pulled for funding? And within about 24 hours, you're going to get an automated reply. You'll get 1 of 2 responses. The first one will say, we have received your request regarding the PUNS list. Based on the current list, we expect your selection to be month and then year. This is great. That means your loved one is on the wait list and you kind of have a good tentative idea of when you're going to get funding. Now, when I would speak to an ISC agent, say, okay, but how really accurate is this automated system? Typically they'd say, it's actually pretty good. Okay. So if you're like, how much weight do I put in this reply? I'd put some weight behind it. Okay. It's automated and it's hopefully working as it should. Now, if the reply you get is, we do not find a person by this name in the database, that means that your loved one is not on the PUNS list and therefore they cannot be pulled for funding. So you want to contact your local office. This may mean they need to re-enroll. This may mean they need to do their yearly update, whatever that may be. Maybe you've moved and so you're in a different county, which is a different ISC office. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And they just need to move your profile over. It can be simple, it can be more complex. But this email is a way you can know that in less than 24 hours. So if you're like, it's a weekend, you can't call them and you want to know, send this email, you'll get an automated response and you'll know whether your loved one's on the PUNS list or not. This email can be sent about every 6 months. So if you're curious, is it getting shorter? Is it getting shorter? Is this changing? Every 6 months. So you've waited your 44 months and then you get an award letter. Now I have in here award letters were typically sent in July. That's when it used to be. I need to update this and maybe I'll do that tonight. There has been smaller groups being polled throughout the calendar year. So I know that there was some that were pulled in the beginning of January. Information has been shared with me that there was people taken off the PUNS list last month. There might be another group that are taken off in July. So it could happen at any point in the year. If you're like, what is this letter going to look like? So this is a link to what the letter looks like. If you're like, I don't know, when I read these things, they're confusing, right? I agree, they are confusing because they want you to apply for services. There's a link to what the letter will look like, exactly what it'll say. You will get one snail mail to your house, but also your ISC agent is going to reach out to you. Okay, and they're going to say, you haven't got this letter. We need to set up services. They're getting funding. And back to what I said in the beginning is this is the start of your 6 months. So you're going to be notified 6 months before the first funding, quote unquote, check arrives. That will give you time to apply for Medicaid if the individual has not already done that, to kind of decide what do we want to do with this funding. Do we need to hire someone? Do we need to train them? Do we need to look at day programs, tour, go through the process, fill out the paperwork? You have 6 months to do all of that, right? Before your first check arrives. Families are like, oh, to wait another 6 months. You're not waiting another 6 months. You're getting a 6-month heads up that says, hey, you're getting some money. Let's make a plan now so you could take advantage of it that very first month that the individual will get their funding. Okay, typical mistakes and frustrations I would see families make is putting this off. Don't put this off. This is something you want to do. That very first phone call, like I said, should take you less than 5 minutes once you've gathered all your information. And then after that, they're reaching out to you. So take the initiative, make the phone call. If you're under the belief that this will be a waste of your time, that it is a lottery system, it is not a lottery system. You're not crossing your fingers. Your ball is going to be picked by, the Illinois Power Lottery. No. Once you're on the list, your name is in a slot and the individual is just going to keep waiting until their name gets all the way to the top and then they get pulled off. Another mistake I would see families make is not truly knowing their individual's disability or their test scores. And this is for good reason. I always felt like, when I would look through an individual's paperwork and I would see one disability, if the family mentioned a different disability, I never felt like they were trying to scam anyone or misshare information, right? It just happens, right? So making sure that you're aware of the disability according to doctor reports, school testing reports, whatever it may be, whatever testing has been done to show the disability is important because you'll need to prove that. But then also knowing the IQ score too. Another mistake I saw was disregarding the application letter. I've seen a family do this, not thinking that it was anything important. So while you're like, I'm waiting, and you get this letter, that's the letter you've been waiting for, right? And there's an example of what it looks like here. Another frustration was not updating it yearly. It takes less than 15 minutes. Update it yearly. They're going to contact you a few times because your ISC agent does want you to stay on the list. That is their goal, for the loved one to stay on the list and continue to accrue their wait time. So take those few minutes and make sure that you update it. I'm not sure where the audience is located, but I have heard that there was a lack of response from local ISC agents. And my best piece of advice is be the squeaky wheel. Be squeaky, call a lot, and just be ready when they call you back. I worked primarily with Service Inc., who was very responsive, called me back, would answer the phone and things like that. I'm very thankful that that was not something my family's had a barrier to, but just keep calling. Just keep calling. But do not send your individual's social security number via email for obvious safety reasons. So there is usually an email contact there. That is where you want to ask for the PUNS intake, but do not share any personal information in that email. How long is the wait time? It's currently 44 months. The state may not do a lot of things right, but they're doing this right. This was really an initiative to make this shorter, led by Allison Stark, who was a former director. She made huge strides for the state. Liggis has made huge strides for the state, if you're familiar with that decree. So we're working in the right direction. The state is actively bringing down that wait time, which is huge. Again, not a lot of states can say that. Why should you prioritize this benefit over others? Because wait time matters, right? You got to wait anyway. So put this at the top of your to-do list because you just got to wait. So you might as well start that wait time first. Funding, crisis funding. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Okay. Crisis. So what would ISC consider a reason for immediate funding versus waiting that 44 months? And it would be defined as homelessness, loss of a primary caregiver, meaning death of a primary caregiver, death of a parent. If there is cases of abuse, neglect, or something of the like. And so this is not going to be, I called, inquired about crisis funding, and I was funded 3 days later. But it is much faster than waiting the 44 months, just to be completely transparent. It once, they have a profile, the profile will need to be updated. The agent would need to know all the information, verify all the information. They would need to submit it. It would need to be approved by the state, and then services would need to be set up. So there is a little bit of a process and a wait time, but obviously significantly shorter than that 44 months. If I move to a new county, do I need to update my profile? You may just need to move it to a different office. Again, some of these offices keep combining, so you might not, but you may need to. Unfortunately, this wait time does not transfer if you move to a different state. So that was a conversation I had with a lot of my families. They're like, we could move here, we could move here. I need to get a new job. I'm like, Michigan is really great. Michigan's really great. But your wait time does not transfer. So if that is something you're considering, just be aware of that. Excuse me. The second half of my presentation, I'm going to talk about other funding options. But SSI, if you're not familiar, supplemental security income is another option that would be quicker than 44 months. I'm going to be specifically talking about DHS home services just right after this. And then the question I'm asked all the time, how much do I really get? How much money do I get if they choose home-based versus SILA? And so the state uses the supplemental security income, SSI, as a guideline. So whatever that amount is, now your individual does not need to have SSI in order to get home-based. This is just kind of what Illinois uses as their multiplier. And so if the individual is funded and they're currently in school or receiving educational services, they get 2 times the SSI per month. So using an easy round number of $900 per month, they would receive, or SSI is $900 a month, they would receive $1,800 per month for home-based services. Now, for individuals who have aged out of special education or are older, they're not receiving any schooling at that time, their multiplier is 3. So if SSI is $900 a month, the home base would be $2,700 a month. And then individuals who choose SILA, that is a whole other complex system that I will not try to even begin to understand, because it really looks different individual by individual and kind of what they see for their future. So that is not the same. Something I will say though is now that districts can, individuals can stay receiving special education services through the end of the school year that they turn 22. Just to be aware that that is just delaying funding for however many months past that. So if an individual is ready to exit, they have things set up, they're fading support from the school system. Once they exit from there, their home-based services funding would go up each month from that. And then here I've just listed below all the contact information by county, because they use areas letters, which means nothing to me, right? So if you're like, I live in DuPage or DeWitt or whatever area, I've broken down yours there. If I was able to get an email address, I did put an email address there. Suburban Access told me, just continue calling. And I said, okay, I'll tell families to do that. So, all right, Kathy, any questions that I can answer before I jump over to DHS home services?
Yes. One kind of important question about the very beginning. A couple people said, is that IQ requirement a hard and fast 70? And in conjunction with that, what happens if somebody, say with Asperger's or autism, has higher than a 70 IQ, but still may have needs for support? What would you say to that?
Um, I would call to ask for the PUNS intake, but I believe that 70 is hard and fast. That, to my knowledge, that is their standard. That's their threshold. I don't want to say that and then deny somebody who could be potentially receiving funding. So definitely reach out, ask, say you want a PUNS intake, have that number that you have, whatever it is, 74, 79, and just ask, because they're going to tell you, they're going to pass along that information in ISEAGE. And if they don't believe, if that doesn't meet the criteria for their eligibility, right? Goes back to that eligibility versus entitlement. They wouldn't waste your time with enrollment or waiting. They would let them know.
Great.
And I do, like, IQ does not really change over the course of somebody's, as you get older, your IQ really, doesn't go up. It kind of is what it is. However, we all know testing when you're 12 might look, your student might care a little bit more at 18 or maybe a little less at 18, right? You know that for sure. So asking around that 18th birthday for the school district, at that 3-year reeval to update IQ is not an unreasonable request because you want that.
And I just want to share, thanks to Mel for sharing that she was told when she emailed for the wait time that they couldn't provide this because her son is younger, or his son is younger than 18. Mm-hmm. So that may be a post 18 calculation.
Yeah.
There's another question about SILAs and intermittent SILAs, about specific medical needs or behavioral needs. And I don't know if you want to get into specifics or if that's something maybe to email.
Yeah. They can email me. I would say if you go under my website, if you click Take Advantage and you scroll down, go to housing options. I have some links in there with more information about what the state defines as SILA and kind of services they provide within that. The person asking this question, you might get a more detailed response or you might get more confused. Either or. So if you get more confused, if this doesn't answer those questions for you, reach out to me. I can either answer them the best of my knowledge or I can try to point you in the direction of somebody who can.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other ones? No? Okay. Okay, so I covered this when I talked about the 2 options, as well as when I was going through the kind of all the details too. Okay, so that third option, that third kind of bucket of funding that I have seen families pursue in the interim. Like, you got on the PUNS list, you're waiting, you need funding, you need some support in that middle time. Now, this could also mean I've had families reach out to me and say, I have what I'm going to talk about. Some call it DRS fund home services, some call it DHS home services. I call it DHS because to me, DRS is vocational. So I'm going to call it DHS tonight, home services. Is they have that DHS home services and then their individual gets pulled for PUNS funding and they have to choose. They have to say, which funding do you want? So I'm going to go through the other option, DHS home services. And so move this so my screen, oh, it doesn't want to move. Okay. as you'll see, I've listed DHS home services funding. So this is not PUNS. This is the other option, the new bucket of paint, is kind of where families can start to receive funding. Then they could bounce to PUNS funding and do home-based. And then from there, they can bounce to SILA. So what that means is that if your individual qualifies for DHS home services funding, they could start receiving that. If they get pulled off the PUNS list, they can move to home-based. And then if they've been in home-based for a few years, a few months, a decade, and your loved one expresses like, I'm ready to move out in the community, you can shift your PUNS funding from home-based to SILA. Okay, so an individual does not need to stay stuck in that home-based option, funding option. They can shift into a SILA option whenever they're ready. Whenever they're ready, whenever the family's ready, whenever their supports are no longer meeting their needs. So this is a way, when I hear families say like, how can I take advantage? Like, what is the best way for me to kind of like pursue these? I'd say this is an option, is you can start here, use this funding for a little while, then use PUNS funding, home-based for a little while until they're ready to pursue that SILA option, the community-based living option. So I wanted to paint that picture. Okay, so I call it DHS home services. This is funding to pay for services so an individual can continue to live at home in their community. An individual would be eligible if they are a state of Illinois resident. They have to have U.S. citizenship or can prove that they had legal entry into the United States. They have to have a significant disability, which I'll talk about when I go through, like the steps to pursue this. And they have to have assets under $17,500 if they're over the age of 18. And this age does matter because under 18, they would take into consideration family or parent assets. What can this be used for? This type of funding is also a monthly funding option. It can be used to pay for personal assistance, so like a care provider, meal delivery, community day programs, assistive technology, home modifications. Many of the like similar things that you're hearing that PUNS would be able to cover, this can also cover it. And it also has an online referral, which I'll go through in just a minute too. And so just a broad overview before I go through all the details. So you're going to refer online, and then they will have a detailed interview, and the family would need to provide doctor evidence of the disability. The agent through DHS is going to create what's called a DON score, stands for Determination of Need, DON score. And if the individual is approved, they'll be assigned a number of hours, right? So this is kind of how it looks different from PUNS funding. PUNS funding says, here's your dollar amount. DHS says, here's your number of hours that you get. And then from there, the family would say, these are the services that the individual needs to be best supported. That could, similar to PUNS, it can also include paying a family member to provide care, which is already done. And then there is a yearly check-in to continue to verify that the individual has this level of need and that they continue to qualify for this program. So there's that yearly check-in of qualification. Okay, so I'm going to go to the same website. I'm going to walk through this one. I know this said 7:15. I'm not going to spend as much time going through this as PUNS because you can find all this information again. If you go to my website and go to Take Advantage, you'll see the DHS Home Services funding option right there. I want to highlight some things, and I'm going to start here, is awareness and assets. So when I had families who were going through this process, it was a really important step for families to be able to articulate in as much detail as they could the level of need that they already provide in their home. And I say this because typically these families have been doing this for a decade plus, right? It is just part of what you do day in and day out. And you may not realize how much support you're providing because it's just part of your routine, right? And so prior to the very first step of even referring online is helping families to understand how much care they're actually providing for their individual, because this was really important once they started that very first step after referral, that interview process. Also making sure that they are aware of assets that might be under the individual's name. So they cannot have more than 17,500. And if the individual's under 18, the family cannot have more than $35,000 in assets. So the very first step is an online referral. I'm going to click this. It's going to kick me out. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. So this is what the referral looks like. You would check the second box here as I would like to help. I would like help living independently in my home. It's going to ask you basic contact information. You submit a code as well as social security number, and you hit submit. So that very first step will literally take you probably less than 2 minutes to do, and it's all online. I said that, ooh, it might kick me out because if you go on it once, it kind of like logs it in your internet. So if you click the button again, it may say, nope, you've already done this before. So you got to like clear your cookies and do it again. I know it's annoying, right? So I just to be aware that that's like a funky part of that referral online. But yeah, you probably already have all this information local to you. Once you hit submit, you're going to get a reply email just as proof that you have submitted referral for this benefit. You'll want to keep that. If you're looking to say, did I do that? What do you search in your email? You search dhs.drs. That is what that auto reply email will be, the sender will be called. Okay. This is where it gets super important. After submitting the online referral, a DHS caseworker is going to reach out to the email and name that was provided in the referral. They have to respond to you. They have to reach out to you within 30 days of receiving the referral. Now, this may take longer, and I don't believe this is a fault of a DHS worker. I believe it's the fault of this department just being notoriously understaffed. Their standard is 30 days, but I'm going to be realistic. It could be longer than 30 days. Once they reach out to you, you need to respond ASAP. Why? Because a caseworker has to make 3 attempts to contact you before they close a case. And a caseworker can reach out to you 2 times in 1 day. They can send you an email and they can call you. And if they call you the next day and nobody picks up, they're going to close that case. Okay? They're going to say, they must not need funding. They're not interested anymore. They're going to close the case, which means if you want this funding, you have to go through the referral again, and you have to wait another 30, potentially plus days. So if it is not like you to check your email every day, you would want to set an alarm on your phone 30 days after you submit that referral to start doing that. I had a family who the parent had a full voicemail box and you couldn't leave a voicemail. And so I called her and I got on the phone. I was like, you need to clean that up. You need to prioritize this today because they're going to call and leave a voicemail, and you're going to want to know that because you're going to need to call right away. So you make the referral, you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. But once you get that contact, you have to respond right away because otherwise they're going to close the case and say you're not interested anymore, which just delays the process. Once they get a hold of you, if they have the information that they believe would warrant, they're probably going to ask you a few screener questions. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Warrant funding, they're going to want to set up an interview with you. Now, I encourage my families to do this interview in the home. Ideally, this is not one you want to do over the phone. Now, this can be very uncomfortable for families, it can be very uncomfortable for the individual for lots of different reasons. However, a family can paint the best picture for the caseworker if the caseworker is able to see it with their own eyes. And Having them come into the home will allow them to see things that they could not see over the phone. So the caseworker is going to have the interview, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but they're also going to ask for paperwork. So once they set up that interview date with you, you're going to be, asked to provide medical records, evaluations, a recent IEP if they're still in school or recently exited, any test scores, determination scores, because they're going to use all that to create that DON score that I talked about, determination of need. So during this phone call, if they contact you and the DHS worker says things like DDD or DRS, this caseworker may be referring the individual to another funding option. They may not believe that the individual would meet the needs, the eligibility needs of this program. DDD, what they mean when they say that is they mean to get on the PUNS list. And so if you've already done that, feel free to share it with them. They may say DRS, which they're talking about vocational rehab services, so helping them find a job. If that's not in the individual's plan, future, let them know that. I felt like families were confused and pushed off because they were using terms that they weren't familiar with and they weren't sure what they meant. So that's why I'm sharing this information with you. That if the caseworker is saying you should pursue DDD, that's PUNS. If they should pursue DRS, that is vocational. If you don't believe that that's right or something that they're already pursuing, like being on the PUNS list, share that information. Okay, so let's talk about the interview for the DON. The caseworker is going to gather all this information. And from what has been shared with me, there's not a specific test or checkbox that the DHS worker is going to try to fulfill because an individual's life and their needs can look a million different ways. So they're going to be probing, asking, interviewing kind of very informally to try to just get as much information as they can to try to determine what the level of need is for the individual and specifically what those needs are. And so keep in mind that honesty is the best policy. Okay, so when the individual is being interviewed, the more detail, evidence, and explanation that can be provided, the better, the more the caseworker is able to learn. And so I'm going to give this example right here. And I say this was an example that was given to me by somebody who helps develop these DON scores. So a DHS caseworker can say, tell me about the individual's ability to shower themselves. So if the primary caregiver, a parent, says, oh yes, I have to help them wash their hair and body. Okay, that means that you're giving a general overview of support. If the individual then says, I have to help them undress, check the water temperature, help them get in the shower safely, lather and wash their body, lather and wash their hair, rinse thoroughly, assist them getting out of the tub, dry off their body, and change into clean clothes. This paints a very different picture for the DHS caseworker. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. We need to increase awareness of all these things that families are just used to doing, right? You don't want to be brief in your level of description of how you support your loved one. Because the DHS caseworker, if they hear that full scope of support that the individual needs to shower, they're going to say to themselves, okay, it sounds like the individual needs support with physical safety, personal hygiene, and self-care, right? Their level of need looks a lot different than if you just said, yes, I help them shower. Now, the interviewer or the DHS caseworker can also interview the individual, and if they ask, do you need help showering? If the individual says no, when in fact they do, the DHS caseworker has to accept their response. Again, honesty is the best policy, and this can be why it would be beneficial to have the interview happen in a comfortable home setting where they would be able to observe things like that. The caseworker is also going to ask about other things like self-care, personal hygiene, transportation, just their general ability to access things. And they're going to ask for all that medical documentation too. Um, and then once that's done, the caseworker is going to put together a report. And you should expect a response, meaning they were either approved or denied for services within about 60 days of the interview. And if they were approved, they're going to start the process to develop a service plan, which is just going to outline the types of services. And if an individual is approved and the family does not follow up once they were notified of approval, DHS is going to say, sounds like you're not interested, and close your case, right? So this goes back to you've waited and waited and waited for that approval. Once you get it, make sure you're following up and taking action. Support services, again, that you can use this funding for, I mentioned before, but personal care, homemaker, which I'm going to outline the differences in a second, home delivery, adult daycare, assistive devices, things like that. I did link to the document that kind of gives an overview of each of those, a little bit more detail. But the main difference that people are curious about is what is a personal assistant and a homemaker services? These sound very similar. A personal assistant accepts direction from the individual based on their desires and preferences. A homemaker service, opposite of that, is in charge of making choices for that individual. Okay, so it kind of is how vocal, how much advocacy does the individual have in the kind of care that they want to receive or need to receive. If the individual was denied for the services, DHS home services, and you believe that that is an incorrect determination, you can appeal through the home care ombudsman. You can also submit a new referral at any time. I'm not going to skip through this, but I feel like I've highlighted the things that I felt were really important. I also want to be cognizant of time too. Once that service plan has been developed, that is when the number of hours comes in. Now, an individual may get 40 hours a month, they may get 160 hours a month, they may get more than that. It all depends on their level of need. And from there, there's just a lot more detail about what that would look like. So if you're curious about what that would look like, definitely we'll start at step number 5 after an individual is approved. They would need to set up Medicaid if they haven't already, and they would have a yearly update to their profile to see if the funding is meeting their needs. The other big thing about this is that an individual can have this funding option, but then once they're approved, or excuse me, once they get pulled off the PUNS list, they have to make a choice because both of these are Medicaid waiver programs. As I started, unfortunately, talking about all the cuts that could potentially be made. So if the individual does have DHS home services and they're pulled off the PUNS list, right? This is where families can work with their 2 agents and say, what is the better option? Typically, the better option for families and the individual is to move to the PUNS funding, but that isn't always the case. I've had 2 recent communications with families who said it's actually the same. I'm getting the same right now, and our needs are not changing, so we're just going to continue with DHS services, home funding. All right, that works for you, and that's meeting the needs. So it's not out of the norm, but it is typical that most families would then shift to PUNS funding, but you can't have both at the same time. Making sure typical mistakes and frustrations is just making sure that you're cleaning out your voicemail, you're checking your emails 30 days after you appeal or after you refer, not fully articulating the level of need, making sure that you're literally describing every single thing that you do to provide adequate and safety and care for your loved one. Not utilizing all services. Some families see this as the only, like I just need to be paid to care for my loved one when there are other services within this that can be provided. Same with PUNS funding too, using your funding in the ways that will best fit the individual. Once setting up care is choosing the best way to train the people who are providing that care, because it is a two-way street to make sure the individual's getting all of their needs met. And that this is just an extent, there's a lot of paperwork. Sat with the family to fill it all out. It's a lot. It's a lot. Necessary, but it's a lot. It can be overwhelming. The biggest misconception I would hear is that this funding is only for individuals with physical disabilities. Not true. This is not true. It is all based on their level of need, which again goes back to there's not this standard, random person's name, assessment that they use to determine whether the individual is eligible or not. They really paint the picture, which will take a lot of time and effort and energy, but is what's best for the individual, is to fully understand their needs. This program also does not impact SSI payments. So if the individual is receiving SSI payments, they can receive this funding on top of that. Same with PUNS, it will not affect that at all. And how long does the determination process take? So they need to reach out to you within 30 days-ish. And they need to have a decision within 60 days of an interview-ish. So anticipate about 3 to 4 months, and then time after that if they're approved to fully set up funding and payment and services. So contact information referral, I've listed all of there, as well as just the local DHS offices in the area. So that was a lot. I feel like I covered a whole lot. If you have other questions, if you're like, I want to know more, wow, Heather, I really love your step-by-step guides. Tell me more for other benefits. I have 15 of these guides total. I've listed all of them here. SSI, Medicaid, letter of intent, power of attorney, guardianship, respite, housing, even college experience programs. I have posts about those. So if you scan this QR code right here, you can also go to loveforspeciallearning.com/IL, and you can see all of those listed there. I also have kind of like a start here guide to help families and educators too get in the right mindset of how pursuing these benefits is different than pursuing special ed supports and services, accommodations, modifications, all of that, because it is a very different approach. It's a different mentality. So if you're looking for that sort of guidance, I have that there too. It's all just right in there. And if you have any questions, absolutely, you can email me. I will respond to you. I'll be honest that a lot of times my responses will go to people's spam. I try really hard to respond within 24 hours. So if you've emailed me and you didn't get a response, check your spam. It probably went there. And if I don't have an answer, if I can't share my experience that other families have had, I will point you in the right direction as best as I can. Right, Kathy, what other questions came through that I can answer?
There was just one question, which actually is even more relevant, I think. It was a question whether you have to choose between SILA and home-based funding. But I think you can even add, you already did, that you have DHS as one source of funding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you. I think the answer is yes, right, Heather? You do have to choose between SILA, iSILA, or home-based funding. But you can flow back and forth, as you said. Like it's not a permanent decision. You can go back and forth. That didn't used to be the case, but now, because you make the decision to go one way, doesn't mean you can't change your mind or your circumstances change and you can go the other way.
Correct. They would say what an ISC agent would say, if you have that PUNS funding, they'd say the money follows the person. That's the phrase they would use. And so what that means is that if the individual is taking home-based services and their desire, their need changes, their wants change, if they want to start gravitating towards community living, that money should follow them. Okay, so it wouldn't mean going back on a wait list to wait again for 44 months. It just means you may have to provide some documentation. You might have to provide a plan, have an interview and a meeting about what this is going to look like, how we're going to live life differently before you make that shift into that other funding source. And vice versa. The state obviously sees home-based as cheaper than SILA. So they would love for somebody to go from a SILA funding option to a home-based funding. They would love that, right? So that is kind of a quote unquote easier way to flip. But typically individuals are moving from the family home, choosing to move in the community, and that can be done, just shift. Yeah,
Great.
but you got to choose one. You can only paint from one bucket. So you either do DHS, home services, PUNS, home-based, or PUNS, SCILA. You can't have more than one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Heather, your website is a treasure trove of really, really
Thank
good
you.
information.
Thank
And
you.
and I hope everybody checks it out. We put a link in the chat. Again, just to repeat, everybody who was registered for this will be able to receive the recording. Heather, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
You can always review the deck as you review the recording, but are you able to share your deck? So much of your deck is your
Sure.
website. I feel like
Mhm.
we can share the deck, but really just go to the website because
Yeah.
that is the best place and it's got more resources that we didn't even talk about. And on that note, I'm going to just, because we're at time, we're a little beyond time, I want to just say, if you want to learn more, because there's more, on May 22nd, Heather will be talking about SSI and SSDI, when to apply, who qualifies, how SSI and SSDI differ, and how do you take advantage of both. So you can get more information on May 22nd. So sign up for that webinar if you're interested. And Heather, unless there's anything else you want to conclude with.
Yeah, I have one more
Yes,
thing. If
absolutely.
I I'm a checklist kind of girl. I need a checklist to get my things done, right? I created a checklist for each of these benefits. So if you're like, I heard all that PUNS funding and I need something to put on my refrigerator or the front of my binder, or I want to put something in my phone to check off as I do all these tasks. Again, just go to this website or any of the benefits, and you'll see at the very top it says free download. You can click, and I have a different checklist for each of these benefits, which can help people stay motivated and proactive and to feel accomplished. So I know that that's super helpful. So I do offer that
Love,
too.
love a checklist.
Yes.
Love, love, love. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. We had some people that said to say thank you, Heather, that had to log off a little bit earlier, but we really, really couldn't appreciate it more. And we know that there's going to be a lot of traffic on your website tonight and in the coming days. So
Good. And please
thank
share this out with families, anybody, you're a past educators, therapists, please share this information. That's how everyone gets the support they need.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and we hope you'll keep checking out future webinars, and we'll try to make these things available on the Center for Independent Futures website. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.